What's your rank?" The mocking laughter of Lance Corporal Jake Thompson echoed through the weapons maintenance bay. He looked down at Sabrina, who was kneeling beside an M4 carbine, her cleaning cloth moving with an unusual precision around the trigger assembly. "Where'd you learn that?" "Walmart?" The Marines around him chuckled. Staff Sergeant Williams propped his feet up on the workbench, watching with amusement as Thompson continued. "I'm serious. You clean that weapon like you know every bolt and screw." Sabrina didn't look up, her hands continuing their methodical work on the barrel assembly. She was 38 years old, small in her gray janitor uniform, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Just making sure it's clean, sir." "Sir?" Thompson mocked. "That sounds military. Are you some kind of washout? Got kicked out of boot camp?" Sabrina paused for a second, an almost imperceptible moment of silence. In her mind flashed helicopter rotors, the dust of Abbottabad, and a voice through the radio, "Geronimo EKIA." But what they didn't know was that in the next 20 minutes, every assumption they had about the woman kneeling before them would be completely shattered. Thompson stepped closer, his confidence growing with each laugh from his audience. The weapons bay was filled with the usual suspects: young Marines fresh from training, a few NCOs supervising, and the constant hum of activity that defined life on Camp Pendleton. The California sun streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, where dozens of weapons lay in various states of maintenance. Sabrina continued her work, her movements economical and precise. She handled the M4 like a surgeon with a scalpel, each motion deliberate and practiced. Thompson noticed this too, and it only fueled his suspicion and mockery. "Look at this," he announced to the room. "We've got ourselves a tactical janitor here." More laughter rippled through the bay. Staff Sergeant Williams, a man in his mid-30s with the weathered look of someone who'd done multiple deployments, stood up from his perch. He'd been watching the interaction with growing interest, not because he found it particularly funny, but because something about the woman's demeanor was setting off alarm bells in his head. "Thompson," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of his rank. "What's the situation here?" Thompson straightened slightly, addressing his superior. "Staff Sergeant, this civilian contractor is acting suspicious. She's got unusual knowledge of our weapons systems." Williams approached, his eyes fixed on Sabrina. "Is that right? Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification." Sabrina finally looked up, her gray eyes meeting Williams's gaze directly. There was no fear there, no nervousness that one might expect from someone being questioned by military personnel. Instead, there was a calm that seemed almost unnatural. "Of course, Staff Sergeant." She reached into her back pocket and produced a worn ID card. Williams examined it carefully. "Sabrina Hayes, Contract Services." He looked back at her. "Says here, you're cleared for basic facility maintenance. That doesn't typically include weapons handling." Sabrina returned to her cleaning without missing a beat. "The work order specified deep cleaning of all equipment in this bay, Staff Sergeant. I'm simply being thorough." Corporal Mitchell, a 25-year-old with an aggressive demeanor that compensated for his lack of combat experience, decided to join the interrogation. "Thorough? Lady, you're handling that weapon like you've stripped down 1,000 of them. Where exactly did a janitor learn advanced weapons maintenance?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time Sabrina's hands paused in their work. It was barely noticeable, but Mitchell caught it. "See that? She's hiding something." Private Chen, barely 19 and still intimidated by his more senior colleagues, watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. Something about this felt wrong to him. The woman wasn't doing anything threatening or suspicious. She was just doing her job well. Too well, apparently, for the taste of his fellow Marines. He started to speak up. "Maybe we should just let her work," but Thompson's sharp glare cut him off immediately. "Chen, did anyone ask for your opinion? Stand down." The tension in the bay was growing thicker. Other Marines had stopped their own work to watch the confrontation unfold. Sabrina seemed completely unbothered by the attention, continuing her methodical cleaning of the weapon. But there were small things, barely perceptible details that a trained observer might notice. The way her eyes continuously scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. The way she positioned herself with clear lines of sight to the entrances. The way her body language suggested someone ready for action despite her calm demeanor. If this injustice makes your blood boil, hit like and subscribe to support these stories of unsung heroes being underestimated. "I think we need to escalate this," Williams announced, reaching for his radio. "Something's not right here." But before he could make the call, Sabrina spoke again, her voice remaining perfectly steady. Is there a specific concern about my work, Staff Sergeant? Williams paused, radio halfway into his mouth. Yeah, there is. You demonstrate an unusual familiarity with military equipment and procedures. That raises red flags in my book. Thompson, emboldened by his supervisor's support, decided to press further. Let's test her military knowledge then. If she's just a janitor, she won't know the first thing about actual combat procedures. He gestured toward the weapon in Sabrina's hands. Tell me, what's the effective range of an M4 carbine? Sabrina didn't hesitate. 550 meters for a point target, 800 meters for an area target. The quick, precise answer caught Thompson off guard. He'd expected her to stumble or guess wildly. Lucky guess, he muttered, but his confidence was clearly shaken. Corporal Mitchell stepped forward. Okay, what about ammunition types? What's the difference between M8 5-5 ball and M8 55A1? Again, Sabrina answered without pause. M8 55 ball is a full metal jacket round weighing 62 grains. M8 55A1 is a steel penetrator round weighing 62 grains, but with a hardened steel core for improved barrier penetration. The room fell silent. These weren't the kind of details a civilian contractor would typically know, especially not a janitor. Mitchell's face flushed red. Where the hell did you learn that? Private Chen, finding a moment of courage, whispered to another Marine nearby. Maybe she's a veteran. There's nothing wrong with that. But his comment was overheard by Thompson, who wheeled around. Chen, I told you to keep your mouth shut. And no, there's something very wrong with a supposed janitor knowing classified ammunition specifications. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had been quietly observing from across the bay. A 20-year veteran with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, he possessed the kind of situational awareness that came from surviving multiple combat tours. He'd noticed the unusual interaction developing and was growing increasingly concerned, not about Sabrina, but about the behavior of his junior Marines. The woman was clearly knowledgeable about military equipment, but that didn't make her a threat. However, the escalating harassment was becoming a serious problem that could reflect poorly on his command. Sabrina continued her work, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension around her, but those with keen observation skills might notice how she'd positioned herself strategically. Her back was to a wall, giving her a clear view of all approaches. The weapon she was cleaning was within easy reach and could be reassembled in seconds if needed. Her posture, despite her kneeling position, suggested someone ready to move quickly if necessary. These were the unconscious behaviors of someone with extensive tactical training. I think we need to call this in, Williams announced, his suspicion overriding any sense of proportionality. This woman has knowledge she shouldn't have, and I want security to take a look at her. He reached for his radio again, but this time Sabrina looked up and made direct eye contact. For just a moment, Williams saw something in those gray eyes that made him hesitate. It wasn't fear or guilt. It was the steady, unflinching gaze of someone who'd faced far more dangerous situations than an interrogation by suspicious Marines. Staff Sergeant, Sabrina said quietly, I'm simply doing the job I was assigned to do. If there are concerns about my clearance or qualifications, I'm sure your chain of command can address them through proper channels. The response was perfectly reasonable, delivered in a tone that was respectful but not subservient. It was the kind of measured response that came from experience dealing with military bureaucracy and tense situations. Thompson, however, interpreted her calm demeanor as defiance. Look at her. She's not even worried. That's not normal. A regular civilian would be nervous right now, maybe even scared. This woman is way too composed. He was right, of course, but for reasons he couldn't possibly understand. Sabrina's composure came from years of training in situations far more dangerous than an aggressive questioning by young Marines. She had maintained her cover in environments where discovery meant death. This was merely an inconvenience. The weapons bay had essentially stopped functioning as Marines gathered to watch the confrontation. Word was spreading through the facility that something unusual was happening. Security Chief Barnes, a man in his 50s with a bureaucratic mindset and an inflated sense of his own importance, had heard the reports and was making his way to investigate. Barnes was the kind of security professional who saw threats everywhere and considered his vigilance the only thing standing between the base and disaster. What's the situation here? Barnes demanded as he entered the bay, his chest puffed out with authority. Williams quickly briefed him on the situation, emphasizing Sabrina's unusual knowledge and suspicious behavior. Barnes listened with the grave expression of someone convinced he'd uncovered a serious security breach. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. Sabrina looked up from the weapon she'd been meticulously cleaning. For the first time since the incident began, she showed a flash of what might have been annoyance. On what grounds? Barnes bristled at the question. On the grounds that you've demonstrated knowledge of classified information and are behaving suspiciously on a military installation. Sabrina carefully placed the cleaning cloth on the workbench and stood slowly. Even standing, she was smaller than most of the Marines around her, but there was something about her posture that suggested she was far from helpless. I've answered every question asked of me truthfully and completely, Sabrina stated. I've shown my identification and explained my presence here. I've demonstrated no threatening behavior. What specific regulation or law do you believe I've violated? The questions were precise and legal in nature, suggesting someone familiar with military justice and procedures. Barnes, who was more accustomed to intimidating nervous civilians, found himself momentarily at a loss. Master Sergeant Rodriguez decided it was time to intervene. He approached the group with the measured pace of someone who commanded respect through experience rather than volume. What seems to be the problem here? Williams quickly explained the situation again, but Rodriguez listened with a skeptical expression. When Williams finished, Rodriguez turned to Sabrina. Ma'am, with respect, you do seem to have an unusual knowledge of military procedures and equipment. Can you help us understand how you acquired that knowledge? Sabrina met Rodriguez's gaze directly. Unlike the hostile questioning from the younger Marines, his approach was professional and respectful. I pick up information quickly, Master Sergeant. When you work around military equipment regularly, you tend to learn about it. It was a reasonable answer, but not entirely satisfying. Rodriguez had been around long enough to recognize evasion, even skillful evasion. But he also recognized the difference between someone being cautious and someone being deceptive. Thompson, growing frustrated with the lack of resolution, decided to escalate further. I don't care what she says. Nobody learns this stuff just from picking it up. I want to test her. If she's really just a janitor, let's see how well she handles a real weapons challenge. Williams nodded in agreement. That's actually not a bad idea. If she fails, we know she was just repeating memorized information. If she succeeds, then we know something's not right. Corporal Mitchell, eager to participate in what he saw as exposing a fraud, suggested specific tests. Make her field strip the weapon blindfolded. Make her identify different ammunition types by touch. Real operators can do that stuff. Wannabes can't. The challenges were becoming increasingly sophisticated, requiring hands-on skills rather than just memorized information. Sabrina listened to their discussion with an expression that revealed nothing. Inside, she was calculating probabilities and outcomes. Demonstrating advanced weapons skills would certainly raise more questions, but failing to do so might also create suspicions. Her cover identity was solid, but it was designed to withstand casual scrutiny, not a determined investigation by suspicious military personnel. Private Chen, who had been watching the entire interaction with growing discomfort, finally found the courage to speak up. Master Sergeant, with respect, is this really necessary? She's just trying to do her job. Rodriguez appreciated the young Marine's moral courage, but he also understood the concerns being raised. Chen, I appreciate your input, but we need to address these questions properly. Security Chief Barnes, feeling like the situation was slipping away from him, decided to assert his authority more forcefully. I'm ordering a complete background investigation. This woman is going to be detained until we can verify every detail of her story. It was an overreach, and Rodriguez knew it, but Barnes had the authority to make such decisions within his domain. That seems excessive, Rodriguez said carefully, not wanting to directly contradict Barnes, but clearly disagreeing with the approach. We have no evidence of wrongdoing, just unusual competence. Barnes shot him a sharp look. Unusual competence in classified areas is exactly what we should be investigating. For all we know, she could be gathering intelligence. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Intelligence gathering, espionage, foreign infiltration. These were serious charges that could destroy someone's life. Sabrina remained perfectly still, but those watching carefully might notice the subtle shift in her posture. She was no longer just alert. She was ready for action. The false accusation had triggered something deeper than professional annoyance. Thompson, emboldened by Barnes's support, decided to push for immediate action. Let's search her belongings. If she's gathering intelligence, she might have cameras or recording devices. The suggestion was gaining support among the group, Despite the complete lack of evidence for any wrongdoing, mob mentality was taking over, transforming reasonable caution into paranoid suspicion. "Before we do anything else," Rodriguez interjected, "I think we should contact the chain of command. This is getting beyond a simple security question." He was trying to inject some procedure and rationality into a situation that was spiraling out of control, but Barnes was having none of it. "Rodriguez, I appreciate your input, but I'm in charge of security matters. This woman is coming with me for questioning, and that's final." Sabrina finally spoke, her voice still calm but carrying a new undertone of steel. "I understand your concerns, but I have rights under both civilian law and military regulations. I'm happy to cooperate with any legitimate investigation, but I won't be bullied or intimidated." The statement was delivered with quiet authority, the kind that came from someone accustomed to command situations. "Bullied?" Thompson exploded. "Lady, we're trying to protect this base from potential threats. If you've got nothing to hide, you should welcome the investigation." Sabrina turned her gray eyes on him with an expression that made him take an involuntary step backward. "Young man, I've been protecting things you can't even imagine since before you were born. Show some respect." The rebuke hit Thompson like a physical blow. There was something in her voice, a note of absolute certainty and authority that suggested she wasn't bluffing. For the first time since the confrontation began, he felt a flicker of doubt about his assumptions. Williams noticed the change in his subordinate's demeanor and felt his own confidence wavering. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was studying Sabrina with new interest. Her response had been revealing in ways she probably didn't intend. The mention of protecting things since before you were born suggested a much longer involvement with security and defense matters than a civilian contractor should have. The way she'd said it, with casual certainty rather than desperate boasting, indicated someone speaking from genuine experience. Security Chief Barnes, however, interpreted her response as further evidence of deception. Now she's claiming to be some kind of long-time security professional. The story keeps changing. That's a classic sign of someone trying to maintain a false identity. He reached for his radio to call for backup, convinced he was dealing with a serious security threat. But before Barnes could make his call, an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. The piercing sound of the base security alert cut through all other noise, immediately changing the atmosphere in the weapons bay. Red lights began flashing, and the automated announcement system crackled to life. "Security breach detected. All personnel report to assigned emergency positions." This is not a drill. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every Marine in the bay instantly shifted into emergency mode, their petty disputes forgotten in the face of a real security threat. Thompson and Mitchell rushed toward their assigned positions, while Williams began barking orders to organize the response. Rodriguez moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd responded to countless alerts over his career. But it was Sabrina's response that was most telling. Without conscious thought, she moved into action with a speed and precision that was unmistakably professional. She secured the weapon she'd been cleaning, with movements so fast they were almost a blur. Her positioning shifted instantly to provide maximum tactical advantage and situational awareness. She began scanning for threats and escape routes with the automatic responses of someone with extensive emergency training. The transformation was so complete and so rapid that Private Chen, who was still in the bay, stopped dead in his tracks and stared. The nervous janitor had vanished, replaced by someone who moved like a special operations professional. Her entire demeanor had changed from passive compliance to active readiness. It was like watching someone drop a disguise. Master Sergeant Rodriguez caught the transformation too, and his suspicions crystallized into certainty. This wasn't a civilian contractor with unusual knowledge. This was someone with serious military training, possibly at a very high level. But instead of being alarmed, he felt a strange sense of relief. If his instincts were right, they had seriously underestimated this woman, but not in a way that posed a threat to base security. The security alert continued blaring, and base personnel throughout the facility were responding according to established protocols. But in the weapons bay, a different kind of revelation was unfolding. Sabrina had dropped her cover of timid compliance and was operating like someone trained to handle crisis situations. She moved to a position that provided optimal oversight of the bay's entrances and exits while maintaining access to multiple weapons if needed. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out, his voice cutting through the alarm noise, "you seem to know what you're doing." Sabrina glanced at him, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped. He saw recognition in her eyes, the look of one military professional acknowledging another, but she didn't respond directly, instead focusing on the emergency protocols playing out around them. Security Chief Barnes, who had been about to call for backup before the alarm sounded, was now torn between responding to the base emergency and continuing his investigation of the suspicious janitor. The immediate security threat took precedence, but he wasn't about to let his concerns about Sabrina disappear. "Rodriguez, keep an eye on her. I need to coordinate the security response, but this isn't over." Thompson, who had been rushing toward his emergency position, paused to look back at Sabrina. What he saw confused and unsettled him. The woman he'd been mocking and intimidating was now moving with the confidence and skill of a seasoned operator. Her transformation was so complete that he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake in his assessment of her. The alarm continued for several more minutes before finally stopping. The announcement system crackled again. "Security alert concluded. False alarm due to equipment malfunction. Resume normal operations." The sudden return to normalcy left everyone in the ZB feeling slightly deflated, but the incident had served to reveal important information about the people involved. Sabrina slowly began to relax her tactical posture, but the change back to her janitor persona wasn't as complete as before. Some element of her professional bearing remained visible, as if the emergency had cracked the facade she'd been maintaining. She returned to the workbench where she'd been cleaning weapons, but her movements retained a crispness that hadn't been there before. "Interesting response time there, ma'am," Rodriguez commented as he approached her position. "You moved like someone with emergency training." Sabrina met his gaze directly, and this time there was no attempt to hide her competence. "Everyone should know how to respond to security alerts, Master Sergeant." It was still evasive, but delivered with the confidence of someone who no longer felt the need to appear helpless. Thompson and Williams returned to the weapons bay, but both men were clearly re-evaluating their earlier assumptions. The woman's behavior during the alert had been anything but that of a nervous civilian contractor. She'd moved with purpose and skill, demonstrating situational awareness and tactical thinking that suggested extensive training. "We need to finish this conversation," Williams announced, but his tone had changed from hostile suspicion to professional curiosity. "Ma'am, your response to that alert was highly professional. That level of competence doesn't come from picking up information casually. I think we deserve a more complete explanation of your background." Sabrina considered her response carefully. The false alarm had forced her to reveal more of her capabilities than she'd intended, making it impossible to maintain her cover of complete civilian ignorance. But she still couldn't reveal her true identity or mission without compromising operational security. She needed to find a middle ground that would satisfy their questions without exposing classified information. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, addressing the senior NCO directly, "you're a professional with extensive experience. You understand that some people have backgrounds that can't be discussed in detail, even when there's nothing improper about them." It was a careful way of acknowledging that she had military experience without specifying what kind or when. Rodriguez nodded slowly. He'd suspected as much from her behavior and responses. "Are you saying you're a veteran, ma'am?" The question was direct but respectful, the kind that recognized she might have legitimate reasons for being circumspect about her service. Sabrina hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks and benefits of partial disclosure. "Yes, Master Sergeant, I am." The admission hung in the air, changing the entire dynamic of the situation. Thompson and Williams exchanged glances, both realizing they'd been harassing a fellow service member. Private Chen looked relieved, as if his instincts about the woman's character had been validated. Security Chief Barnes, however, remained skeptical. "What branch?" Williams asked. "What was your MOS?" These were standard questions that any veteran would expect and should be able to answer without compromising security. Sabrina's hesitation before answering suggested she was choosing her words very carefully. "Navy," she said finally. "I'd prefer not to discuss specific assignments." The response was truthful but incomplete, revealing just enough to explain her competence without exposing sensitive information. Rodriguez, who had worked with Navy personnel in joint operations, recognized the deflection as the kind that usually indicated involvement with special operations or classified programs. Thompson, who was beginning to feel increasingly foolish about his earlier behavior, decided to apologize. "Ma'am, if you're a veteran, I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have been so hostile." The admission cost him some pride, but it was the right thing to do. Sabrina nodded acknowledgement but didn't respond verbally, her attention still partially focused on maintaining her cover. But Security Chief Barnes wasn't satisfied with partial disclosure. Even if you're a veteran, that doesn't explain why you're working as a janitor or why you're being evasive about your background. I still want a complete investigation. His suspicion had hardened into certainty that something improper was happening, regardless of evidence to the contrary. "Barnes," Rodriguez interjected, his voice carrying a warning tone. "The woman has answered our questions. She's identified herself as a veteran, which explains her knowledge and competence. Unless you have specific evidence of wrongdoing, I suggest we allow her to complete her assigned duties." The Master Sergeant's intervention carried the weight of his experience and rank, but Barnes was determined to pursue his investigation, convinced that he was protecting the base from a serious threat. "I'm calling this into higher command. Let them decide if her story checks out." He reached for his radio, intent on escalating the situation beyond the weapons bay. "This is Security Chief Barnes requesting immediate background verification for a contract employee." As Barnes made his call, Sabrina continued her cleaning duties with mechanical precision. But those watching carefully could see that she was calculating options and preparing for multiple contingencies. The situation was moving beyond her control, and she needed to be ready to adapt to whatever developed next. Her cover was holding, but barely, and any serious investigation would quickly reveal information that could compromise her mission. The radio crackled with a response. "Barnes, this is command. What's the nature of your concern?" Barnes quickly outlined the situation, emphasizing Sabrina's unusual knowledge and evasive responses. There was a pause before command responded. "We'll send someone down to assess the situation. Maintain your current position and ensure the individual doesn't leave the area." The instruction to prevent Sabrina from leaving marked a significant escalation. She was now effectively under detention, despite having committed no actual violation of law or regulation. The situation had moved from casual harassment to formal investigation, creating exactly the kind of attention that her mission parameters were designed to avoid. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of events. His professional instincts told him that they were dealing with a veteran who deserved respect rather than suspicion. But Barnes had the authority to conduct security investigations, and Rodriguez couldn't directly interfere without exceeding his own jurisdiction. Private Chen, who had been watching the entire incident unfold, approached Rodriguez quietly. "Master Sergeant, this doesn't feel right. She hasn't done anything wrong." The young Marine's moral courage was admirable, but Rodriguez couldn't act on sentiment alone. "I understand your concern, Chen, but we need to let this process play out." Thompson and Williams were standing together near the bay entrance, discussing the situation in low voices. Both men were beginning to suspect that they'd made serious errors in judgment, but they were committed to the course of action they'd initiated. "Think she's really Navy?" Williams asked. Thompson shrugged. "The way she handled that security alert? Yeah, I'd say she's got military background. Question is, what kind?" The question hanging over everyone was not whether Sabrina had military experience, but what kind of experience it was. Her competence level suggested something beyond standard military training, but the specifics remained hidden behind her careful evasions and professional discretion. The mystery was only deepening as more information became available. As they waited for someone from higher command to arrive, the weapons bay settled into intense quiet. Sabrina continued her assigned duties with methodical precision, but everyone present was aware that they were in a holding pattern before some kind of resolution. The false alarm had revealed capabilities that couldn't be easily explained away. And now, they all had to deal with the consequences of that revelation. You catch that detail? Comment your theories about what's really going on here. The 20 minutes that followed felt like hours. Sabrina completed the cleaning of 3 additional weapons with the same meticulous attention to detail that had started the entire controversy, but now her competence was being viewed through a different lens. Instead of suspicious behavior, it was beginning to look like professional excellence. The Marines who had been skeptical were starting to wonder what other assumptions they'd gotten wrong. Master Sergeant Rodriguez found himself studying Sabrina's every movement, looking for additional clues about her background and training level. The way she handled weapons suggested someone with extensive experience, not just basic military service. Her situational awareness remained high even while performing routine tasks, indicating ingrained tactical habits that took years to develop. Security Chief Barnes spent the waiting time making additional calls and checking databases, convinced that a thorough investigation would vindicate his suspicions. But each inquiry was yielding results that supported Sabrina's claimed identity rather than undermining it. Her contract employment was legitimate, her clearances were current, and there were no red flags in any of the standard security databases. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the weapons bay, indicating that someone from higher command was finally arriving to assess the situation. Barnes straightened his uniform and prepared to present his case to superior authority. Thompson and Williams moved to positions where they could provide supporting information if requested. But when the figure appeared in the doorway of the weapons bay, it wasn't the junior officer or administrative representative that everyone had expected. It was Colonel James Henderson, the base executive officer and second in command of the entire installation. His presence immediately elevated the significance of the situation from a minor security inquiry to a matter of high-level attention. Colonel Henderson was a man in his early 50s, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that came from decades of military command. He'd served multiple combat tours and had experience with classified operations and special projects. His appearance in the weapons bay meant that someone upstairs was taking the situation very seriously indeed. "What's the situation here?" Henderson asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made junior personnel stand straighter. Barnes quickly briefed him on the events, emphasizing his concerns about Sabrina's unusual knowledge and evasive behavior. The colonel listened without interruption, occasionally glancing at Sabrina, who continued her work with apparent unconcern. When Barnes finished his report, Henderson turned to Master Sergeant Rodriguez. "What's your assessment, Master Sergeant?" Rodriguez, being asked for his professional opinion by a senior officer, answered carefully. "Sir, the individual in question appears to be a military veteran with extensive training. Her behavior during our recent security alert was highly professional. I see no indication of improper activity." Henderson nodded, then addressed Sabrina directly. "Ma'am, I understand there are some questions about your background. Would you be willing to speak with me privately?" It wasn't really a request from someone of his rank, but it was phrased respectfully. Sabrina looked up from the weapon she was cleaning and met his gaze directly. "Of course, Colonel." She carefully set down her cleaning supplies and stood, her posture unconsciously shifting to something approaching military bearing. Henderson gestured toward a small office adjacent to the weapons bay, and they walked together while the others watched with intense curiosity. Once inside the office with the door closed, Henderson's demeanor changed subtly. "Ma'am, I'm going to be direct with you. Your knowledge and behavior suggest military experience well beyond what most veterans would possess. Combined with your current employment in a sensitive area, that raises legitimate questions. Can you help me understand what we're dealing with here?" Sabrina met his gaze steadily, weighing her options. Henderson struck her as a professional who might understand the complexities of classified assignments and operational security. "Colonel, I can confirm that I have extensive military experience. However, much of it involves classified programs that I'm not authorized to discuss." Henderson nodded slowly. "What I need to know is whether your presence here represents any kind of security risk or operational conflict. Can you assure me that your current employment is legitimate and doesn't compromise base security?" The question was direct and fair, addressing the core concerns without demanding unnecessary details. "Sir, I can absolutely assure you that my presence here poses no security risk. My employment is completely legitimate, and I'm operating within all applicable regulations and clearances." Sabrina's response was unequivocal, delivered with the confidence of someone telling the truth. Henderson studied her face, using decades of experience reading people under stress. "All right," he said finally, "that's sufficient for my immediate concerns. However, the incident out there has created a situation that needs to be managed. You've demonstrated capabilities that are going to generate continued questions and attention. We need to decide how to handle that." It was at that moment that Henderson's radio crackled with an incoming message that would change everything. "Colonel Henderson, this is Command. We've completed the enhanced background check you requested. Please contact us immediately for sensitive information briefing." The message was coded in a way that indicated classified information was involved. Henderson looked at Sabrina with new interest. "Ma'am, I'm going to step out and take this call. I'd appreciate it if you'd wait here." As he left the office, Sabrina could hear him speaking quietly into his radio. "This is Henderson. Go ahead with that briefing. What followed was a conversation that Sabrina couldn't hear but could imagine. Somewhere in a secure communications center, Henderson was learning information that would dramatically change his understanding of the situation. The enhanced background check that had seemed like routine security procedure was revealing details that weren't available in standard databases. After several minutes, Henderson returned to the office, his expression markedly different from when he'd left. He looked at Sabrina with what appeared to be a mixture of surprise and respect. "Ma'am, I've just received some very interesting information. It seems that your background is even more extensive than I suspected." Sabrina remained perfectly still, unsure what information had been revealed, but knowing that her carefully maintained tour was about to face its most serious test. Henderson continued, "I'm not going to discuss specifics here, but I think it's safe to say that the young Marines outside have seriously underestimated who they've been dealing with." The colonel's change in tone and demeanor suggested that he'd learned something significant about her identity or service record. Sabrina calculated the possibilities, trying to determine how much of her background might have been revealed and what the implications might be for her current mission. "Sir," she said carefully, "I hope you understand that there may be operational considerations that limit what I can discuss, even with someone of your clearance level." It was a delicate way of acknowledging that security protocols might prevent full disclosure while respecting his authority and need to know. Henderson nodded. "I understand completely. What I need to determine is how we handle the situation outside. Those Marines are expecting some kind of resolution, and Security Chief Barnes is convinced he's uncovered a major security breach. How do we address their concerns without compromising your operational requirements?" It was a sophisticated question that demonstrated Henderson's experience with classified operations and the challenges of maintaining cover stories while satisfying legitimate security concerns. Sabrina appreciated his professional approach to a complex situation. "Colonel, if I may suggest, perhaps the simplest approach would be to confirm that I'm a veteran with appropriate clearances and leave the specifics classified. Most personnel would accept that explanation from someone of your authority." It was a reasonable solution that addressed immediate concerns without requiring detailed revelations. Henderson considered the suggestion. That might work for most of the personnel involved, but Barnes is likely to continue pushing for more detailed information. He's convinced he's protecting the base from a serious threat. The security chief's persistence was becoming a complicating factor that couldn't be easily dismissed. "Sir, in my experience, people like Barnes can usually be managed by appealing to their sense of professional duty. If you explain that continued investigation might compromise classified operations, he should accept the directive to stand down." Sabrina's suggestion revealed her familiarity with handling security personnel and maintaining operational security. The colonel smiled slightly. "You sound like someone who's dealt with this kind of situation before." It was an observation rather than a question, suggesting he had learned enough about her background to know she had extensive experience with classified operations and security protocols. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the office door. "Colonel Henderson?" It was Master Sergeant Rodriguez's voice. "Sir, Security Chief Barnes is requesting an update on the situation. The personnel are getting restless." Henderson sighed, recognizing that the situation outside needed immediate attention. "We'll finish this conversation later," he told Sabrina. "For now, let me see what I can do to calm things down without compromising your position." As they prepared to return to the weapons bay, Henderson paused. "Ma'am, I want you to know that regardless of whatever operational considerations are involved, I have deep respect for your service." When they returned to the main area, all eyes focused on them immediately. Barnes stepped forward, clearly expecting a full briefing on whatever had been discovered. "Colonel, what did you learn? Are my concerns justified?" Henderson's response was measured and authoritative. "Chief Barnes, I've conducted a thorough review of this situation. The individual in question is a military veteran with appropriate clearances for her current assignment. There are no security concerns, and she's operating completely within regulations." The statement was definitive, clearly intended to close the matter, but Barnes wasn't satisfied with the general assurance. "Sir, with respect, that doesn't address the specific concerns about her unusual knowledge and evasive behavior. I believe we need a more detailed investigation." His persistence was beginning to irritate Henderson, who wasn't accustomed to having his assessments questioned by subordinate personnel. "Chief Barnes," Henderson said, his voice taking on a steelier tone, "I've told you that the matter has been resolved. Are you questioning my judgment?" It was a direct challenge to Barnes's continued insistence on investigation, putting him in the position of either accepting authority or risking insubordination. Thompson and Williams watched the exchange with fascination. They'd initiated the entire incident with their suspicions and harassment, but now they were seeing how quickly situations could escalate beyond their control. The arrival of a senior officer and the obvious significance of whatever information he'd received was making them increasingly uncomfortable about their role in events. Private Chen, who had been troubled by the harassment from the beginning, felt a sense of vindication. His instincts about Sabrina being deserving of respect rather than suspicion were clearly being validated by Henderson's response. But he also recognized that the situation was far from over. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was studying the body language and verbal exchanges, trying to piece together what information Henderson had received. The colonel's change in attitude towards Sabrina was dramatic, suggesting that her background was far more significant than anyone had suspected. But the specifics remained hidden behind operational security requirements. Sabrina returned to her cleaning duties, but now with the protection of Henderson's authority. The hostile questioning had ended, but she could feel the continued curiosity and speculation from the Marines around her. Her cover had held under pressure, but maintaining it going forward would require continued careful management. The weapons bay gradually returned to normal activity as personnel resumed their assigned duties. But the underlying tension remained, fueled by unanswered questions and the sense that something significant had been revealed but not fully explained. The incident had changed relationships and perceptions in ways that would have lasting effects. As the day continued, word of the incident began spreading throughout the base. Stories had a way of growing in the telling, and by evening, various versions of events were circulating through the barracks and mess halls. Some focused on the harassment of a veteran, others on mysterious security concerns, and still others on the dramatic intervention by senior command. But in the weapons bay, the immediate crisis had passed. Sabrina completed her assigned cleaning duties with the same methodical precision that had started the entire incident. The difference was that now her competence was being viewed as professional excellence rather than suspicious behavior. The frame of reference had changed everything. Henderson remained in the area for the rest of the afternoon, partly to ensure that the situation remained stable, and partly because he was personally intrigued by the woman whose background had generated such interesting information from command. He found himself watching her work with professional admiration rather than security concerns. As the workday drew to a close, personnel began securing equipment and preparing to leave. Sabrina finished her cleaning duties and began packing her supplies with the same careful attention to detail that characterized all her actions. But she remained alert to her surroundings, knowing that curiosity about her background wasn't going to disappear overnight. Thompson approached her position hesitantly, clearly wanting to say something, but uncertain how to proceed. Finally, he spoke. "Ma'am, I want to apologize again for my behavior earlier. I was out of line, and I'm sorry." The apology was sincere, coming from someone who had realized he'd made serious errors in judgment. "Apology accepted," Sabrina replied simply. She didn't elaborate or offer explanations, maintaining the same professional discretion that had characterized her responses throughout the day. Thompson nodded and walked away, but the exchange had been noticed by others in the area. Williams also approached, his apology more formal but equally sincere. "Ma'am, I let the situation get out of hand. As an NCO, I should have handled it more professionally." Sabrina acknowledged his apology with the same quiet dignity, neither condemning nor absolving, simply accepting and moving forward. Private Chen, emboldened by the changed atmosphere, approached with a different kind of message. "Ma'am, thank you for your service. I'm sorry about how you were treated today." His words carried genuine respect and appreciation, recognizing her as a fellow service member, deserving of honor rather than harassment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had been observing these exchanges with professional interest. As the senior NCO in the area, he felt responsible for ensuring that lessons were learned from the day's events. He approached Sabrina with measured respect. "Ma'am, I hope you understand that not all Marines behave the way some did today. We're better than that." "I understand completely, Master Sergeant," Sabrina replied. "Every service has individuals who need to learn and grow. Today provided some learning opportunities." Her response showed both wisdom and grace, refusing to condemn an entire organization based on the actions of a few individuals. As personnel continued to leave, Security Chief Barnes remained behind, clearly frustrated by the unresolved nature of the situation from his perspective. He approached Henderson, who was preparing to depart. "Colonel, I still have concerns about operational security. This incident has raised questions that I think deserve more thorough investigation." Henderson turned to face Barnes directly, his expression making clear that his patience was exhausted. "Chief Barnes, I'm going to be very clear with you. This matter is closed. The individual in question has appropriate clearances and authority for her activities. Any further investigation could compromise classified operations. Is that understood?" The mention of classified operations was a clear warning that Barnes was treading on dangerous ground. Continuing to push for investigation could lead to serious consequences for his own career and clearances. Reluctantly, he nodded acceptance, though his expression showed continued dissatisfaction. With the formal resolution of the security concerns, the weapons bay finally returned to normal end-of-day procedures. Equipment was secured, areas were cleaned, and personnel departed for evening activities. But the day's events had created ripples that would continue to spread throughout the base community. Sabrina was among the last to leave, completing her duties with characteristic thoroughness. As she prepared to depart, Henderson approached one final time. "Ma'am, I want you to know that if you experience any further difficulties related to today's incident, you should contact me directly." "Thank you, Colonel. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this situation." Sabrina's response was formal but genuine, recognizing Henderson's skill in managing a complex security and operational challenge. As she walked away, Henderson watched with continued curiosity about the woman whose background had generated such interesting classified information. The incident in the weapons bay was over, but its implications would continue to unfold in ways that none of the participants could fully anticipate. Questions had been raised and partially answered, but mysteries remained that would influence future interactions and perceptions. The day had revealed that assumptions could be dangerous, that appearances could be deceiving, and that respect should be earned through behavior rather than rank or position. For Sabrina, the day represented a successful navigation of a serious threat to her operational security. Her cover had held under pressure, support had come from unexpected quarters, and she could continue her assigned mission. But she also knew that maintaining her position would require continued vigilance and careful management of the curiosity her competence had generated. As the California sun set over Camp Pendleton, the base settled into evening routines, but in barracks and mess halls throughout the installation, conversations continued about the incident in the weapons bay. Stories were told and retold, with details changing in each iteration. Some focused on the harassment of a veteran, others on the mysterious security investigation, and still others on the dramatic intervention by senior command. The truth, as often happens with classified operations and complex military situations, remained partially hidden behind operational requirements and security protocols. But the day's events had served as a reminder that the military community included individuals with backgrounds and capabilities that couldn't always be easily categorized or understood. Respect and professional courtesy were always appropriate, regardless of apparent rank or position. In her quarters that evening, Sabrina reviewed the day's events and their implications for her ongoing mission. The incident had created complications, but also opportunities. Her demonstrated competence had earned respect from key personnel, while her discretion had maintained essential operational security. The balance between visibility and invisibility that characterized her assignment continued to require careful management. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, as it always did in military communities where diverse personnel worked together toward common goals. The lessons of today would influence future interactions, hopefully creating an environment of greater mutual respect and understanding. But the fundamental requirements of operational security and mission success would continue to shape all decisions and actions. The weapons bay stood empty and secure, ready for the next day's activities. Equipment was properly maintained and stored, thanks in part to the professional attention it had received from someone whose qualifications exceeded all expectations. The incident was over, but its impact on individuals and relationships would continue to unfold in ways both seen and unseen. And in the broader context of military operations and national security, another day had passed in which dedicated personnel carried out their assigned duties with skill and dedication. Some openly, others from the shadows, all contributing to the complex mission of defending the nation and its interests. The incident had revealed that heroism and expertise could be found in unexpected places, often hidden behind humble appearances and quiet professionalism. As night fell over the base, security patrols began their rounds, ensuring the safety and security of personnel and equipment. The routine of military life continued, built on the foundation of trust, discipline, and mutual support that had been tested and ultimately strengthened by the day's events. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to serve with honor and distinction. The story of the incident in the weapons bay would become part of the base's informal history, told and retold as a reminder of the importance of treating all personnel with respect and dignity. It would serve as a caution against making assumptions based on appearances, and as an encouragement to recognize excellence wherever it might be found. But the full truth would remain classified, known only to those with the appropriate clearances and need to know. In the complex world of military operations and national security, such incidents were reminders of the human elements that shaped all activities. Behind every position and assignment were individuals with their own histories, capabilities, and contributions. Some were obvious and public, others hidden and classified, but all were essential to the mission of protecting and defending the nation. The day's events had honored that tradition, while pointing toward continued service in whatever form it might take. The following morning brought with it the crisp California air that made Camp Pendleton such a desirable assignment for many Marines. But in the weapons maintenance bay, the atmosphere was charged with an undercurrent of tension that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. Word of the previous day's incident had spread throughout the base, with the speed that only military gossip could achieve, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about what had really happened. Sabrina arrived at her usual time, 700 hours, carrying her cleaning supplies and wearing the same gray janitor uniform that had become the center of so much controversy. But this morning was different. Instead of the casual dismissal or outright hostility she'd faced before, she found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations. The Marines in the bay weren't quite sure how to interact with someone whose background had generated such high-level attention. Lance Corporal Thompson was already present, having arrived early in what appeared to be an attempt to intercept Sabrina before the day's activities began in earnest. His demeanor was markedly different from the previous day's arrogant confidence. Instead, he approached her position with obvious nervousness, clearly wanting to say something, but uncertain how to proceed. "Ma'am," he began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about yesterday, and I realize I need to do more than just apologize." Sabrina looked up from organizing her cleaning supplies, her gray eyes meeting his with the same steady calm that had characterized her responses throughout the previous day's ordeal. "What did you have in mind, Lance Corporal?" Her tone was neither encouraging nor discouraging, simply neutral and professional. Thompson shifted his weight from foot to foot, the confidence that had driven his harassment completely absent. "I want to understand how I got it so wrong," he said finally. "I mean, I pride myself on being able to read people, but I completely misjudged you. That's a problem, especially if I'm going to be an effective Marine." The admission showed a level of self-reflection that suggested real potential for growth, though it remained to be seen whether this was genuine insight or simply guilt-driven reaction. Before Sabrina could respond, Staff Sergeant Williams entered the bay with Master Sergeant Rodriguez close behind. Both men immediately noticed the interaction between Thompson and Sabrina, and their expression showed they were prepared to intervene if necessary. Williams had spent much of the previous evening reviewing his own actions and coming to uncomfortable conclusions about his role in the harassment. "Thompson," Williams called out, his voice carrying a warning tone. "Is there a problem here?" The staff sergeant's protective instinct was clearly engaged, though whether for Sabrina's benefit or to prevent Thompson from creating additional problems was unclear. Thompson turned to face his superior, his expression showing both embarrassment and determination. "No problem, Staff Sergeant. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes." The response was honest and direct, suggesting that Thompson's reflection had led to genuine recognition of his errors rather than simply regret at being caught. Williams studied his subordinate's face, using his experience reading Marines to assess the sincerity of the statement. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached the group with his characteristic measured pace, his eyes scanning the situation for any signs of continued tension or conflict. As the senior NCO in the area, he felt responsible for ensuring that the lessons of the previous day were properly absorbed and that no repeat incidents occurred. "How are we doing this morning?" he asked, directing the question to the group rather than any individual. "We're working through some learning opportunities, Master Sergeant," Sabrina replied, her diplomatic phrasing acknowledging Thompson's attempt at self-improvement without either condemning or absolving his previous behavior. Rodriguez nodded approvingly, recognizing her grace in handling a difficult situation. The woman continued to demonstrate wisdom and professionalism that impressed him. Corporal Mitchell chose that moment to arrive, his entrance immediately changing the dynamics in the bay. Unlike Thompson, who had spent the night in self-reflection, Mitchell appeared to have doubled down on his suspicions and hostility. His body language was aggressive and confrontational as he approached the group, clearly intent on continuing the previous day's investigation, despite Colonel Henderson's clear directive to let the matter rest. "So what's the real story?" Mitchell demanded, his question directed at Sabrina, but obviously intended for the entire group. "Yesterday got shut down before we got real answers. I still think there's something not right here." His persistence in pursuing a matter that had been resolved by higher authority demonstrated either remarkable dedication or dangerous insubordination. Williams immediately stepped between Mitchell and Sabrina, his expression showing barely controlled anger. "Corporal Mitchell, you will stand down immediately. This matter was resolved yesterday by Colonel Henderson himself. Are you questioning the Colonel's judgment?" The challenge was direct and unmistakable, forcing Mitchell to either retreat or commit himself to open insubordination. But Mitchell was apparently prepared to push the confrontation further than anyone expected. "Staff Sergeant, with respect, I don't think we got the full story yesterday. This woman has knowledge she shouldn't have, and I think we deserve to know why." His insistence on continuing the investigation despite clear orders to the contrary was creating a serious disciplinary situation. Rodriguez decided to intervene before Mitchell's insubordination escalated beyond recovery. "Corporal Mitchell, report to my office immediately. We need to discuss your understanding of military authority and chain of command." The order was delivered with the quiet authority that made it clear this was not a request or suggestion, but a direct command. Mitchell's face flushed red, but he recognized that he had pushed the situation beyond the point of retreat. "Yes, Master Sergeant," he replied through gritted teeth, his tone making clear his dissatisfaction with the resolution. As he walked toward Rodriguez's office, his body language suggested someone who felt betrayed by his own chain of command's failure to support his investigation. The removal of Mitchell from the immediate situation allowed the tension to decrease somewhat, but the underlying issues remained. Private Chen, who had been watching the interaction with obvious concern, approached the group hesitantly. "Master Sergeant, is everything going to be okay? This feels like it's getting worse instead of better." Chen's concern was well-founded. The previous day's incident had created fractures within the unit that weren't healing naturally. Some personnel, like Thompson, were genuinely trying to learn and grow from their mistakes. Others, like Mitchell, were doubling down on their initial positions and creating additional problems. The situation required careful management to prevent permanent damage to unit cohesion and morale. "Everything's going to be fine, Chen," Rodriguez assured the young Marine. "We're working through some challenges, but that's part of how military units grow stronger." The Master Sergeant's confidence was reassuring, but everyone present could sense that significant issues remained unresolved beneath the surface. Sabrina continued her assigned duties throughout this exchange, methodically cleaning weapons with the same professional attention to detail that had triggered the original controversy. But she was clearly aware of every word and gesture around her, maintaining the situational awareness that had become second nature through years of training and operational experience. The morning progressed with an undercurrent of tension that affected everyone's productivity. Marines who would normally joke and banter while working found themselves speaking in subdued tones, aware that their interactions were being scrutinized for signs of continued problems. The easy camaraderie that characterized healthy military units had been replaced by careful politeness that satisfied no one. At approximately 10:30 hours, the bay's routine was interrupted by the arrival of Security Chief Barnes, accompanied by 2 military police officers. Barnes's presence immediately elevated everyone's alertness level, as his involvement could only mean that some aspect of the previous day's incident was being reopened or escalated. His expression showed the grim satisfaction of someone convinced he was about to be vindicated. "I need to speak with the contract employee Hayes immediately," Barnes announced, his voice carrying an air of official authority that made clear this wasn't a casual inquiry. "We've received additional information that requires follow-up investigation." The mention of new information sent a chill through the personnel present, as everyone wondered what developments might have occurred overnight. Williams stepped forward, his protective instincts clearly engaged. Chief Barnes, Colonel Henderson resolved this matter yesterday. What additional information could possibly justify reopening it? The staff sergeant's challenge was respectful but firm, reflecting his growing commitment to protecting Sabrina from continued harassment. Barnes's smile was cold and triumphant. Staff Sergeant, we've received reports that raise serious questions about this individual's true identity and purpose. I'm conducting this investigation under direct authority from higher command. The claim of higher authority was clearly intended to circumvent Henderson's previous resolution and restart the investigation Barnes felt had been prematurely terminated. Rodriguez, recognizing the serious implications of Barnes's claim, stepped forward to assert his own authority. Chief Barnes, I'm going to need to see written authorization for this investigation. Colonel Henderson's directive yesterday was quite clear, and I won't allow harassment of personnel without proper documentation. The Master Sergeant's demand for written orders was a sophisticated way of challenging Barnes's claimed authority. Master Sergeant, Barnes replied, producing a folder from his briefcase, here's my authorization. As you can see, this comes directly from Base Security Command with appropriate endorsements. He handed the folder to Rodriguez, his expression showing confidence that his documentation would satisfy any challenges to his authority. Rodriguez opened the folder and examined its contents carefully, his expression remaining neutral as he read. The other personnel in the bay watched anxiously, trying to gauge from his body language whether Barnes's authorization was legitimate or whether this was another overreach of authority. After several minutes, Rodriguez looked up with an expression of concern. The authorization appears to be in order, he said reluctantly, his tone making clear his dissatisfaction with the development. However, I'm noting for the record that this investigation is proceeding over the objections of senior personnel who have previously reviewed this matter. It was a careful way of establishing a paper trail that might protect everyone involved if the investigation went badly wrong. Sabrina had listened to this exchange while continuing her work, but now she straightened and faced Barnes directly. Chief Barnes, I'm prepared to cooperate with any legitimate investigation. However, I maintain my previous position that I've violated no regulations and pose no security threat. Her calm demeanor in the face of renewed investigation impressed everyone present. Ma'am, we'll see about that, Barnes replied, his tone suggesting he expected to uncover serious violations. I'm going to need you to accompany me for formal questioning. This investigation will be conducted according to standard security protocols. The mention of formal questioning and standard protocols suggested a much more serious investigation than the previous day's informal inquiry. Thompson, who had been watching the proceedings with growing alarm, suddenly stepped forward. Chief Barnes, I was the one who started this whole thing yesterday. If anyone should be investigated, it's me for harassment. This lady hasn't done anything wrong. The young Marine's willingness to accept responsibility for his actions showed genuine character development, though it was unlikely to influence Barnes's determination to pursue his investigation. Lance Corporal Thompson, your role in yesterday's events has been noted, Barnes replied dismissively. However, the issues we're investigating go far beyond your initial concerns. This is now a matter of base security and operational integrity. The expansion of the investigation beyond the original harassment complaint suggested that Barnes had found or created additional justification for his pursuit of Sabrina. Williams was growing increasingly frustrated with Barnes's persistence in pursuing what seemed like a vendetta disguised as a security investigation. Chief Barnes, I want to go on record as stating that this investigation appears to be retaliatory in nature. The individual in question has cooperated fully with all previous inquiries and has been cleared by senior command. Barnes turned his cold gaze on Williams. Staff Sergeant, I appreciate your concern for your personnel, but this matter is beyond your authority. The investigation is proceeding whether you approve or not. The dismissive tone was clearly intended to shut down any further challenges to his authority, but it also revealed the personal animosity driving his actions. Private Chen, despite his junior rank and natural inclination to avoid confrontation with senior personnel, found the courage to speak up. Chief Barnes, with respect, this feels wrong. We're supposed to protect each other, not tear each other down. The young Marine's moral courage was admirable, though it was unlikely to influence the investigation's direction. Private Chen, Rodriguez said quietly, I appreciate your input, but this is not the time or place for that discussion. The Master Sergeant was trying to protect Chen from potential retaliation, while also maintaining proper military protocol in an increasingly volatile situation. As Barnes prepared to escort Sabrina from the bay for formal questioning, the sound of approaching vehicles could be heard outside. The rumble of multiple engines suggested a convoy rather than a single vehicle, indicating that something significant was developing. Barnes paused, clearly wondering if the arrival was related to his investigation or represented some unrelated base activity. The bay's main entrance was suddenly filled with the imposing figure of Brigadier General Patricia Morrison, the base commanding general herself. Her presence immediately elevated the situation to the highest possible level, as commanding generals don't typically involve themselves in routine security matters. Behind her walked Colonel Henderson and another officer that most personnel didn't recognize, but whose bearing suggested someone of significant authority. Every person in the bay immediately snapped to attention, the automatic response to the arrival of senior command. Barnes, despite his confidence in his authorization, suddenly looked much less certain about the wisdom of his investigation. The arrival of the commanding general suggested that forces far beyond his understanding or control were now involved in the situation. "As you were," General Morrison commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. She surveyed the scene with experienced eyes, taking in the positioning of personnel, the tension in the air, and the obvious confrontation that had been interrupted by her arrival. "I understand we have a situation here that requires command attention." Colonel Henderson stepped forward to provide the general with a brief overview of the situation, speaking in low tones that couldn't be overheard by the other personnel present. The unknown officer remained silent but alert, his attention focused on Sabrina with an intensity that suggested professional interest rather than casual curiosity. After Henderson finished his briefing, General Morrison turned her attention to Security Chief Barnes. "Chief Barnes, I understand you're conducting an investigation based on what you believe to be security concerns. I'm here to personally review this matter and ensure it's handled appropriately." Her tone was neutral, but carried an undertone that suggested Barnes's investigation was about to face the highest level scrutiny. "Yes, General," Barnes replied, his earlier confidence noticeably diminished by the commanding general's personal involvement. "I believe we have legitimate security concerns that require investigation." He gestured toward his authorization folder, but General Morrison didn't immediately examine it, instead focusing her attention on Sabrina. "Ma'am," the general said, addressing Sabrina directly, "I understand you've been subjected to questioning regarding your background and qualifications. I want to assure you that this matter will be resolved fairly and according to proper procedures." The general's personal assurance carried weight that no subordinate authority could match. "Thank you, General," Sabrina replied, her composure remaining steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "I've tried to cooperate fully with all legitimate inquiries while maintaining appropriate operational security." Her reference to operational security in front of the commanding general suggested confidence that her position would be understood and supported. General Morrison nodded, then turned to the unknown officer who had accompanied her. "Major Collins, would you please brief the relevant personnel on the situation?" The major stepped forward with the bearing of someone accustomed to delivering sensitive briefings to senior leadership. "Ladies and gentlemen," Major Collins began, his voice carrying the authority of someone speaking for higher command, "I'm here representing Joint Special Operations Command. The individual you know as Sabrina Hayes is currently assigned to a classified operation that falls under my operational authority." The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present, finally providing context for the unusual knowledge and capabilities that had generated so much controversy. Thompson's jaw dropped as the full implications of the major's statement sank in. The woman he'd been harassing and mocking was not only a veteran, but an active operator assigned to the Special Operations Command. The magnitude of his error was becoming clear, and the potential consequences were staggering. Williams felt a mixture of vindication and horror as he realized how close they'd all come to compromising a classified operation. His protective instincts towards Sabrina had been well-founded, but even he hadn't suspected the true scope of her background and current assignment. Rodriguez nodded slowly, his experience with special operations personnel allowing him to recognize the truth in Major Collins's briefing. The woman's competence and situational awareness made perfect sense in the context of current special operations assignment, rather than simply being an unusually skilled veteran. Security Chief Barnes's face had gone pale as he realized the enormity of his mistake. His investigation hadn't uncovered a security threat. It had nearly compromised a legitimate special operations mission. The career implications were becoming clear, and they weren't positive. "Major Collins," General Morrison said, "please continue your briefing. I think these personnel deserve to understand what they've been dealing with." The general's directive suggested that full disclosure was appropriate, given the circumstances and the need to prevent future incidents. Chief Petty Officer Sabrina Hayes is a decorated veteran of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, commonly known as SEAL Team 6, Major Collins continued, his words creating stunned silence in the bay. She's currently assigned to a classified counterintelligence operation designed to identify and neutralize potential security threats within military installations. The revelation that Sabrina was not only an elite operator, but was actively investigating security threats within the base itself, added another layer of irony to Barnes's determined investigation. He had been pursuing someone who was actually conducting the kind of security work he claimed to be protecting. Furthermore, Collins added, Chief Hayes is a veteran of Operation Neptune Spear, the mission that eliminated Osama bin Laden. Her qualifications and clearances are far beyond what most personnel will ever achieve in their careers. The mention of the bin Laden raid elevated Sabrina's credentials to legendary status, making the harassment she'd endured seem even more egregious. Thompson felt physically sick as the full scope of his behavior toward a national hero became clear. He'd mocked and belittled someone who had participated in one of the most significant military operations in recent history. The shame was overwhelming, and he struggled to process the magnitude of his error. Private Chen looked at Sabrina with undisguised awe, realizing he'd been in the presence of someone whose service and sacrifice had protected the entire nation. His instincts about treating her with respect had been more accurate than he could have imagined. Sabrina herself remained composed throughout Collins's briefing, though those watching carefully might have noticed a slight relaxation in her posture. The revelation of her true identity and mission meant that maintaining her cover was no longer necessary, at least within this group of personnel. The reason for Chief Hayes' current assignment, Collins continued, relates to intelligence indicating potential security compromises at multiple installations. Her mission requires her to maintain a low profile while conducting surveillance and assessment activities. The explanation finally provided context for her evasive responses and careful behavior throughout the previous day's questioning. General Morrison stepped forward to address the assembled personnel directly. What happened here over the past 24 hours represents both a failure and an opportunity. The failure is obvious, the harassment of a distinguished service member based on assumptions and prejudice. The opportunity is for all of us to learn and grow from this experience. She turned her gaze specifically toward Thompson and the other Marines who had participated in the harassment. Your behavior toward Chief Hayes was unacceptable and could have compromised a critical national security operation. However, I'm told that some of you have shown genuine remorse and a desire to learn from your mistakes. That counts for something. Thompson found his voice despite his overwhelming shame. General, I don't have words to express how sorry I am. I've dishonored myself and my uniform, and I've disrespected someone who deserves nothing but honor and gratitude. His apology was heartfelt and complete, showing genuine understanding of his failures. Lance Corporal Thompson, the general replied, your apology is noted and appreciated, but apologies alone aren't sufficient. Real change requires action and commitment to growth. She paused, studying his face to assess his sincerity. You'll be enrolled in a comprehensive sensitivity and awareness training program. Your performance in that program will determine your future in the Marine Corps. Williams stepped forward to address his own role in the incident. General, as an NCO, I failed in my duty to protect all personnel under my authority. I should have stopped the harassment immediately instead of participating in it. His acceptance of responsibility showed the kind of leadership accountability that military organizations required. Staff Sergeant Williams, General Morrison acknowledged, your recognition of your failures is appropriate. You'll also be enrolled in leadership development training focused on protecting all personnel regardless of their apparent status or position. The general's response was firm but not punitive, recognizing the difference between poor judgment and malicious intent. Security Chief Barnes remained silent, recognizing that his situation was far more serious than the others involved. His persistent investigation, despite clear guidance to cease, combined with his antagonistic approach, had nearly compromised a classified operation. The general would address his case separately and more severely. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had consistently tried to manage the situation appropriately, received acknowledgement for his professional approach. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, your handling of this situation demonstrates the kind of leadership we expect from senior NCOs. Your intervention prevented the situation from becoming much worse. Major Collins took over the briefing again, addressing the operational implications of the incident. Chief Hayes's mission will continue, but with some modifications to account for the compromise of her cover within this unit. The operation itself remains classified, and nothing discussed here today may be shared with anyone not present in this bay. The security reminder was important, as the revelation of Sabrina's identity and mission created additional responsibilities for everyone who had learned the classified information. Maintaining operational security would now be a shared responsibility among all personnel present. Sabrina was given tactical insurance policy access during equipment processing, the specialized coverage reserved for high-risk operations that only Tier 1 operators qualify for due to their unique mission parameters and exposure levels. Chief Hayes, General Morrison said, addressing Sabrina directly, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you've received. Your service to this nation has been extraordinary, and you deserved much better from the personnel at this installation. The general's personal apology carried significant weight, acknowledging both Sabrina's service and the failures of base personnel. Thank you, General, Sabrina replied, her voice carrying quiet dignity. I understand that the situation resulted from misunderstandings rather than malicious intent. Everyone involved has shown the capacity to learn and grow, which is what really matters. Her gracious response to the harassment she'd endured impressed everyone present with her professionalism and character. Collins continued with additional details about the operational context. Chief Hayes's presence here is part of a broader effort to assess security vulnerabilities at installations across the country. Her findings will contribute to enhanced protection measures for all military personnel and facilities. The explanation helped put the harassment incident in perspective as something that could have undermined national security rather than simply being workplace misconduct. Thompson raised his hand tentatively, clearly struggling with internal conflict about speaking up. When acknowledged, he asked, Chief Hayes, is there anything we can do to make up for our behavior? I know apologies aren't enough, but I want to do whatever's possible to show we've learned from this. Sabrina considered his question carefully before responding. Lance Corporal Thompson, the best way to honor any service member is to treat all personnel with the respect and dignity they deserve, regardless of their apparent rank or position. Real warriors don't advertise their capabilities. They demonstrate them through their actions and character. Her response contained wisdom that went far beyond the immediate situation, offering guidance for how military personnel should interact with each other, regardless of visible indicators of status or authority. The principle applied not only to interactions with undercover operators, but to all human relationships within military communities. General Morrison nodded approvingly at Sabrina's response. Chief Hayes has provided you with an important lesson about military professionalism and human dignity. I expect every person here to internalize that lesson and apply it throughout your careers. The general's endorsement elevated Sabrina's guidance to the level of command policy. Collins consulted his watch and informed the group that the briefing needed to conclude soon, as he had additional responsibilities related to the ongoing operation. Before we finish, I want to address the security implications of today's revelations. Everything discussed here falls under national security classifications that carry serious legal consequences for unauthorized disclosure. The reminder about security classifications was necessary to ensure that everyone understood their responsibilities regarding the classified information they'd received. Unauthorized disclosure could result in criminal charges and imprisonment, making the obligation to maintain silence both legal and patriotic. Private Chen asked permission to speak and was acknowledged by the general. Ma'am, will Chief Hayes continue working here, or will the mission require her to move to a different location? His question showed genuine concern for her welfare rather than simple curiosity about operational details. Private Chen, Collins replied, operational details must remain classified, but I can say that Chief Hayes's mission will continue in whatever capacity best serves national security interests. The non-specific answer protected operational security while acknowledging Chen's appropriate concern for a fellow service member. As the briefing moved toward conclusion, General Morrison addressed the broader implications of the incident for base policies and procedures. This situation has revealed gaps in our personnel training and awareness that must be addressed. We'll be implementing comprehensive programs to ensure that all personnel understand their obligations to treat everyone with appropriate respect and dignity. The policy changes would have lasting impact beyond the immediate participants, potentially affecting thousands of military personnel and improving treatment of everyone working on military installations. What had started as harassment of one individual was becoming a catalyst for positive change throughout the entire military community. Colonel Henderson consulted classified legal databases accessible only to senior officers with Level 5 security clearances, systems designed for investigating matters involving special operations, personnel, and sensitive national security cases. Security Chief Barnes was finally addressed directly by General Morrison, her tone making clear that his situation was far more serious than the others involved. Chief Barnes, your persistent investigation, despite clear guidance to cease, combined with your hostile approach toward a decorated special operations veteran, represents a serious failure of judgment and professional conduct. Barnes's face showed he understood the severity of his position, but he attempted one final justification for his actions. General, I was only trying to protect base security. The individual's behavior seemed suspicious, and I felt obligated to investigate. His explanation showed he still didn't fully understand how wrong his assessment had been. Chief Barnes, the general replied coldly, your obligation was to follow proper procedures and accept the guidance of senior command. Your personal suspicions don't override established chain of command or operational security requirements. The rebuke was delivered with the authority of someone who wouldn't tolerate continued excuses or justifications. Major Collins added his own assessment of Barnes's actions from an operational security perspective. Chief Barnes, your investigation threatened to compromise a classified counterintelligence operation. The potential consequences extend far beyond this installation to national security interests. The special operations perspective on Barnes's actions made clear that his errors had implications beyond simple workplace harassment. Barnes finally seemed to understand the full scope of his mistakes, his expression showing the dawning realization that his career was likely over. I understand, sir. I accept full responsibility for my actions and their consequences. The admission was appropriate, but came far too late to mitigate the damage his poor judgment had caused. General Morrison announced that Barnes would be relieved of his security duties immediately and would face formal disciplinary proceedings that could include court-martial charges. Security personnel must demonstrate sound judgment and respect for proper authority. Chief Barnes has failed in both areas. The general's announcement meant that Barnes's military career was effectively over. With the disciplinary issues addressed, the briefing shifted toward positive outcomes and future improvements. Thompson, Williams, and the other personnel involved would receive additional training and counseling designed to prevent similar incidents in the future. The focus would be on education and growth rather than purely punitive measures. This incident will serve as a case study for training programs throughout the military, General Morrison announced. The lessons learned here will help prevent similar problems at other installations and improve treatment of all military personnel. The positive framing helped transform a negative incident into an opportunity for widespread improvement. Sabrina was asked if she wished to add any final comments for the personnel who would be undergoing additional training as a result of the incident. Her response was characteristically gracious and forward-looking. I hope everyone involved will remember that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. We serve together to protect something greater than ourselves, and that shared mission should unite us rather than divide us. Her words carried the authority of someone who had demonstrated service and sacrifice at the highest levels, making them particularly meaningful for the junior personnel who had harassed her. Thompson and the others nodded their understanding, clearly moved by her gracious response to their poor treatment of her. Next week features a Navy SEAL posing as a security guard. Subscribe so you don't miss it. As the formal briefing concluded, personnel began to disperse to resume their regular duties. But the atmosphere in the weapons bay had been permanently changed by the revelations about Sabrina's true identity and mission. The casual disrespect and suspicion that had characterized previous interactions was replaced by a profound awareness of who they'd actually been dealing with. Thompson approached Sabrina one final time before she returned to her cleaning duties, his expression showing deep remorse mixed with genuine admiration. "Chief Hayes, I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my career trying to live up to the example you've set. Your service and sacrifice inspire me to be better than I was yesterday." "That's all any of us can do, Lance Corporal," Sabrina replied with a slight smile. "Learn from our mistakes and commit to being better tomorrow than we were today. Your willingness to acknowledge your errors and grow from them shows real character." Her encouraging response demonstrated the leadership qualities that had made her successful in special operations. Williams also approached to offer his final apology and commitment to change. "Chief Hayes, as an NCO, I failed in my duty to protect you from harassment. I promise that will never happen again, not on my watch and not to anyone under my authority." His pledge showed the kind of leadership development that could transform the entire unit's culture. Private Chen, emboldened by the changed atmosphere, approached Sabrina with obvious nervousness but genuine respect. "Chief Hayes, thank you for your service to our country. I'm honored to have met you, even under these circumstances." His sincere gratitude represented the appropriate response that should have been shown from the beginning. Master Sergeant Rodriguez expressed his professional admiration for both Sabrina's service and her handling of the difficult situation. "Chief Hayes, your professionalism throughout this incident has been exemplary. You've demonstrated the kind of character and dignity that all military personnel should aspire to achieve." His assessment carried the weight of his own extensive experience and commanded respect from all junior personnel present. As normal activities resumed in the weapons bay, the lessons of the past 24 hours continued to resonate with everyone involved. The incident had revealed the dangers of making assumptions based on appearances and the importance of treating all personnel with appropriate respect and dignity. These lessons would influence interactions throughout the base for years to come. Sabrina returned to her cleaning duties with the same methodical precision that had characterized her work from the beginning. But now her competence was viewed as professional excellence rather than suspicious behavior. The frame of reference had changed everything, transforming apparent threats into recognized strengths and skills. Over the following days, word of the incident spread throughout Camp Pendleton and beyond. The story became a powerful teaching tool for addressing harassment, discrimination, and the importance of respecting all service members, regardless of their apparent status or position. Training programs incorporated the incident as a case study in professional conduct and operational security. Thompson threw himself into his remedial training with enthusiasm, determined to transform his shameful behavior into positive growth and development. His instructors noted his genuine commitment to change and his growing understanding of military professionalism and respect for others. The incident that could have ended his career became instead the catalyst for significant personal development. Williams also participated actively in leadership development training, focusing on his responsibilities to protect all personnel under his authority. His experience with the incident provided valuable insights into the challenges of maintaining unit cohesion while ensuring fair treatment for everyone. He emerged from the training as a more effective and inclusive leader. Private Chen received recognition for his moral courage in speaking up against the harassment, even when it put him in conflict with senior personnel. His example inspired other junior personnel to find their voices when witnessing inappropriate behavior. The base implemented programs to encourage and protect personnel who reported misconduct. Security Chief Barnes faced court-martial proceedings that resulted in his dismissal from the military with loss of benefits and security clearances. His case served as a warning to other security personnel about the importance of sound judgment and respect for proper authority. The severe consequences reinforced the seriousness with which the military treated these issues. General Morrison used the incident to launch base-wide initiatives focused on improving treatment of all personnel and enhancing awareness of diversity and inclusion issues. The programs addressed not only harassment prevention, but also the broader challenges of maintaining military effectiveness while respecting individual dignity and worth. Major Collins continued his oversight of Sabrina's mission while incorporating lessons learned from the incident into training programs for special operations personnel operating undercover. The experience provided valuable insights into the challenges of maintaining operational security while dealing with suspicious or hostile personnel. Colonel Henderson received recognition for his professional handling of the initial phases of the incident, demonstrating the kind of leadership that prevented a difficult situation from becoming a complete disaster. His approach became a model for other senior officers dealing with similar challenges in their own commands. The weapons bay itself became something of a landmark on the base, known as the location where important lessons about respect and professionalism had been learned. Personnel assigned to work there were briefed on the incident and its lessons as part of their orientation to the facility and its expectations. Sabrina's mission continued with enhanced support from base leadership and improved cooperation from personnel who now understood the importance of her work. The incident had actually strengthened her operational effectiveness by eliminating the suspicion and hostility that had complicated her initial assignments. As weeks passed, the acute attention focused on the incident gradually diminished, but its impact on base culture and personnel behavior remained strong. The lessons learned influenced countless daily interactions and decisions, creating a more respectful and professional environment for everyone working at the installation. Thompson and Williams both received favorable evaluations in their follow-up training, demonstrating genuine learning and growth from their mistakes. Their transformation from harassment participants to advocates for respect and inclusion inspired others to examine their own behavior and attitudes toward fellow service members. The broader military community learned about the incident through professional publications and training materials that used it as an example of both what not to do and how to recover from serious mistakes through genuine accountability and commitment to change. The educational value extended far beyond the immediate participants. Sabrina's true identity remained classified within the base community, known only to those who had been present during the revelations or who required the information for operational reasons. The successful maintenance of operational security demonstrated the professionalism and trustworthiness of military personnel when properly motivated and educated. The incident contributed to broader military policies regarding the treatment of personnel operating undercover or in sensitive assignments. New protocols were developed to provide protection for such personnel while maintaining the security requirements of their missions. These policies enhanced both operational effectiveness and individual safety. Years later, the incident was still being used in military academies and professional development courses as a case study in leadership, professionalism, and the importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect. The lessons transcended military applications and influenced civilian organizations facing similar challenges. For Sabrina personally, the incident represented both a serious threat to her operational security and an opportunity to demonstrate the character and professionalism that had earned her selection for the most demanding military assignments. Her gracious handling of harassment and her willingness to forgive and educate rather than condemn showed the leadership qualities that made her exceptional. The weapons bay continued its daily operations with enhanced efficiency and professionalism, as personnel worked together with mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. The facility became known throughout the base for its positive culture and effective teamwork, attributes that trace directly back to the lessons learned during those crucial 24 hours. Thompson eventually earned promotion and assignment to leadership positions where he was able to influence other junior personnel and prevent similar incidents from occurring. His transformation from harassment participant to advocate for inclusive leadership demonstrated the power of genuine accountability and commitment to growth. Williams advanced to senior NCO positions, where his experience with the incident provided valuable perspectives on protecting all personnel and maintaining unit cohesion. His leadership style emphasized respect for individuals combined with high standards for professional performance, creating environments where everyone could contribute effectively. Private Chen's moral courage in speaking up against inappropriate behavior earned him respect throughout his military career and influenced his development into a leader who prioritized ethical conduct and protection of vulnerable personnel. His example inspired others to find their voices when witnessing wrongdoing. Master Sergeant Rodriguez continued his distinguished career with enhanced awareness of the challenges facing personnel in sensitive assignments and the importance of creating protective environments for all service members. His professional handling of the incident became a model for other senior NCOs facing similar situations. The incident ultimately strengthened rather than weakened the military community by forcing honest examination of attitudes and behaviors that had been tolerated or overlooked. The painful process of confronting failures led to genuine improvements in how personnel treated each other and approached their shared missions. As Sabrina completed her assignment at Camp Pendleton and moved on to other classified missions, she carried with her the knowledge that her experience had contributed to positive changes that would benefit countless other service members. The harassment she had endured became the catalyst for improvements that enhanced military effectiveness and individual dignity. The final legacy of the incident was a base community that was stronger, more inclusive, and more professional than before. Personnel learned to look beyond appearances and assumptions to recognize the worth and contributions of all individuals. These lessons influenced not only military service but civilian careers and personal relationships as well. In the broader context of military evolution and adaptation, the incident represented progress toward more inclusive and respectful organizations that could harness the full potential of all personnel, regardless of their background, appearance, or apparent status. The painful learning process ultimately strengthened military effectiveness and readiness. The story served as a reminder that heroism and expertise could be found in unexpected places, and that assumptions based on appearances could lead to serious errors in judgment. The importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect became not just a moral imperative, but an operational necessity for military effectiveness. As time passed and new personnel rotated through Camp Pendleton, they were briefed on the incident and its lessons as part of their orientation to base expectations and culture. The story became part of the institutional memory that shaped behavior and attitudes for years to come. The weapons bay where it all began continued its mission of maintaining the tools that protected American freedom and security. But now, that mission was carried out by personnel who understood that the greatest weapons were not made of metal and machinery, but of character, respect, and shared commitment to something greater than themselves. In quiet moments, when the day's work was done and the bay stood empty except for the sound of distant ocean waves, the legacy of those 24 hours remained present. It was a legacy of transformation, of learning from failure, and of the power of forgiveness and grace to create positive change from negative experiences. The incident had ended, but its impact would continue for generations of service members who would benefit from the lessons learned through one woman's quiet dignity in the face of injustice and her gracious response to those who had wronged her. That legacy honored both her service and the potential for positive change that existed within every individual and organization committed to growth and improvement. The ripple effects of that transformative day would spread far beyond the confines of Camp Pendleton, touching military installations across the globe as the story became part of official training curricula and leadership development programs. Junior officers would study the incident in war colleges, learning how assumptions and prejudice could compromise both unit cohesion and operational security. Senior enlisted personnel would share the account during mentorship sessions, emphasizing how true strength often disguised itself in humble service and quiet competence. Thompson's journey from antagonist to advocate would inspire countless young Marines facing their own moments of moral reckoning. His willingness to confront his failures and transform shame into positive action demonstrated that character was not fixed but could be forged through honest self-reflection and genuine commitment to change. Williams's evolution as a leader showed how protective instincts, properly channeled, could create environments where all personnel flourished, regardless of their background or apparent status. The weapons bay itself became a symbol of transformation, where the ordinary work of maintenance and preparation took on deeper meaning. Personnel assigned there understood they were not just caring for equipment, but continuing a tradition of service that honored every individual's contribution to the greater mission. The cleaning cloths and weapon parts that had sparked the original confrontation now served as reminders that excellence could be found in the smallest details and most mundane tasks. Sabrina received an encrypted phone call that evening. "Valkyrie, we have another situation." A new classified folder appeared on her secure tablet labeled Operation Silent Guardian. Her final words to Thompson as she prepared for her next assignment captured the enduring nature of her service. Some battles never end, they just change battlefields. The mysteries that remained would continue to intrigue those who had witnessed her competence and character. Questions about other undercover operatives, the scope of ongoing security operations, and the hidden networks protecting American interests would fuel speculation and curiosity for years to come. How many others walked among them, carrying burdens of classified service while maintaining covers of ordinary employment? The thought both humbled and inspired those who had glimpsed behind the veil of operational secrecy. But the most important mystery had been solved, the question of how individuals should treat each other, regardless of appearances or assumptions. The answer lay in recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every person and approaching all interactions with respect, humility, and openness to learning and growth. In the end, the incident at Camp Pendleton became more than just a story about military harassment or operational security. It became a testament to the power of character, the importance of accountability, and the possibility of transformation, even from the most difficult and painful experiences. Those lessons would endure long after all the participants had moved on to other assignments and other challenges. The weapons bay stood ready for another day of service, its personnel prepared to carry forward the lessons of respect, professionalism, and mutual support that would honor both their mission and the sacrifices of those who had served before them. The legacy of Chief Petty Officer Sabrina Hayes would continue to influence and inspire, ensuring that her quiet heroism would never be forgotten.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.